I had a few comments yesterday from my last video with people saying, why would you report the news so negatively? Trump had opened the strait after all. Peace for our time. Well, bad news guys, it's closed again. It is kind of funny to see comments in videos, not just my own, but other videos when someone does a whole thing about why the world is in trouble with lack of oil and a closed strait. And then the strait will apparently open and someone will say, ha, this aged badly. And then just a few hours later, someone will comment underneath that comment and say, ha, it's closed. This also aged badly. It is just one big carousel of absurdity at this point. I don't report stuff negatively out of joy, by the way. I don't wake up and think, I can't wait to rub it in my faces, the critics' faces. And I don't say it because I'm a negative person. Okay, maybe I'm a little bit of a negative person, but I've partly built up some credibility over the last few years by being right about enough things. And if I just made videos analysing only what Trump said, I would be, in his own words, a loser. I analyse a lot of different sources and then put them all together and give them to you and say, make your own mind up. If Trump is the only positive voice out of a chorus of negativity, you should ask why. Anyway, today's update. Yes, Iran closed the strait. Was it ever really open? Hard to say. There were some ships that got through, so yes, technically, but Iran was complaining almost immediately that the strait would close again if the US didn't end its own blockade of Iranian oil and on the strait. It seemed that while one barrier had gone down, the US barrier was still up. The US refused, saying, nope, that's just for you, Iran. And Iran said, okay then, I'll close the strait too. Back to double trouble. Marine traffic data showed a lot of ships suddenly turning around before they could pass the strait. They knew what was coming next. Iran started striking a ship 20 nautical miles northeast of Oman without warning the crew. The crew of the ship being attacked were thankfully reported as safe, but it was clear Iran had now closed the strait again. And this is embarrassing for the US because why and how is the US allowing Iran to open and close the strait at its leisure? A senior Iranian politician even went to social media to taunt Trump. Enjoy a closed strait, he said in caps lock, probably referring to Trump's own heavy use of caps lock in his celebration post from less than 24 hours ago. We understand from early reports that the ship that Iran struck was carrying an Indian flag. The ship was carrying 2 million barrels of Iraqi oil, by the way. You might be thinking, India? Why India? I thought Iran and India were in BRICS. The economic power meant to rival the US. Why would Iran strike a BRICS ally? Well, I think there are two reasons. One of them, I don't think that Iran and India are actually so cozy. You might remember a couple of months ago, the Indian Prime Minister went to Israel to try and secure some nice new shiny Israeli weapons. Also, it shows that Iran is willing to drag even its own friends down in order to survive this war. As many of you have pointed out, Iran has struck most of its Gulf neighbours in this war, including those who tried to mediate peace. In some cases, Iran has said, that wasn't us, we deny it, it was a false flag attack, Israel did it. But in other cases, Iran has said, okay, yeah, we did strike Oman, we did strike all our Gulf neighbours, and they've just said, well, we gotta do what we gotta do. Trump tried to downplay the whole closing of the strait again. He had opened it only 24 hours ago, and Trump called the whole fiasco cute. But Trump later said that the US would not be blackmailed. The question is, does Trump have a choice? Iran has no date for peace talks, it says. But that might come as some news to Pakistan, who has been pretty busy setting up security for that meeting of peace talks. All that work of setting up the meeting wasted, Pakistan might be thinking. We'll have to wait and find out. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, Israeli forces said they had set up a yellow line in southern Lebanon. Israel often calls these yellow lines their security perimeter. The idea is that if their enemy tries to cross over this yellow line, Israel can call it a provocation and strike, giving it an exemption from the ceasefire by their definition. A similar yellow line was also set up in Gaza some time ago, allowing for multiple Israeli strikes when people try to cross over into what they believed was their own country and what is legally still their own country. Israel would argue that its troops need security and a buffer zone from threats while it dismantles the enemy, but many in Lebanon and Gaza would argue that this is just a way for Israel to take their land. The US and Iranian talks are starting to wobble. There was talk that Israel was on high alert to resume the war once again. We will have to see what happens tomorrow.